Let me be direct with you from the outset because what happened at 12:03 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time on May 20th, 2026 is not fully understood even by the agencies tasked with defending against it. At that precise moment, 7 different American military logistics networks experienced simultaneous system failures that lasted between 42 and 93 minutes depending on the network. The failures were not random, they were not coincidental. They were the result of a coordinated cyber operation that American intelligence agencies have now attributed with high confidence to Unit 68, which is the cyber warfare division of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The operation did not steal data, it did not destroy systems, it did not leave obvious traces of malware. What it did was temporarily disable the logistics coordination software used by U.S. Central Command to manage supply routes, fuel distribution, and equipment maintenance for American forces deployed across the Middle East. Those 90 minutes of disruption created cascading delays that are still being resolved 4 days later. More significantly, the operation demonstrated a capability that Pentagon cyber defense planners did not believe Iran possessed. In the next 18 minutes, I am going to walk you through exactly what happened, how Iranian cyber operators achieved access to systems that were supposed to be isolated from external networks, and why American cyber defense experts are describing this as a watershed moment in the evolution of state-sponsored cyber warfare. What we are seeing is Iran signaling that it has developed offensive cyber capabilities that can impose tangible operational costs on American military activities in the region without triggering the kind of kinetic response that a missile attack or physical sabotage would generate. This analysis is based on reporting from CyberScoop, statements from U.S. Cyber Command officials, and technical analysis from cybersecurity firms that have been briefed on the incident. Subscribe now if you have not already, because what we are about to cover is being studied in classified briefings at the Pentagon and is prompting urgent reviews of American cyber defense posture across all regional commands. Let's start with the technical details because understanding how this operation worked is essential to grasping why it matters. The logistics networks that were targeted are not connected to the public internet. They operate on what the military calls a closed network architecture, meaning that workstations and servers on these networks are physically separated from external internet connections. The security theory is that if a network has no connection to the internet, then external attackers cannot reach it remotely. That theory is sound as far as it goes. The problem is that it assumes perfect implementation, and the attack on May 20th exploited an implementation failure that should not have existed but did. According to the initial incident analysis conducted by U.S. Cyber Command and reported by the Washington Post, Iranian operators gained initial access to the logistics networks by compromising a third-party contractor that provides maintenance services for the software systems. That contractor is a technology firm based in Virginia that holds a Defense Department contract for software updates and technical support. The company's employees have authorized access to military logistics networks for the purpose of installing patches, diagnosing technical issues, and performing routine maintenance. That access is supposed to be tightly controlled, logged, and monitored. What the Iranian operation did was compromise the credentials of 3 different employees at this contractor firm over a period of approximately 6 weeks prior to the May 20th attack. The credential theft was accomplished through a sophisticated spear phishing campaign that targeted the personal email accounts of contractor employees. Once Iranian operators had valid credentials, they used those credentials to access the contractor's secure portal, which provides legitimate remote access to military networks for maintenance purposes. According to analysis by Marandi, a cybersecurity firm that has been involved in the forensic investigation, the Iranian operators spent approximately 2 weeks conducting reconnaissance inside the military networks after gaining access. They mapped the network architecture, identified critical logistics systems, and determined the optimal time to execute a disruption operation. The reconnaissance was careful and methodical. The operators did not trigger any of the automated intrusion detection systems because they were using legitimate credentials and accessing systems in ways that appeared consistent with normal maintenance activities. The only anomaly that investigators have identified in retrospect is that the access occurred during overnight hours in American time zones, which is unusual for a Virginia-based contractor, but not impossible. Subscribe if you are watching this and realizing that the vulnerability exploited here is not exotic or sophisticated in a technical sense. It is basic operational security failure. Now let's talk about what happened when the attack was executed. Announcement number 1, at 12:03 a.m. on May 20th, Iranian operators used their compromised access to execute a command that initiated a software update across 7 different logistics networks simultaneously. And this one matters more than anything else because the update was not actually an update. It was a carefully crafted piece of code designed to appear like a legitimate patch, but that actually corrupted specific database tables within the logistics management software. The corruption was subtle. It did not crash systems systems immediately. What it did was introduce inconsistencies into the data that the software uses to track fuel shipments, equipment locations, and maintenance schedules. Those inconsistencies caused the software to generate error messages whenever users tried to access certain functions. Within minutes, logistics officers at U.S. Central Command headquarters in Tampa, Florida began receiving reports from multiple bases across the Middle East that the logistics management system was malfunctioning. Initial troubleshooting attempts failed because the problem was not immediately obvious. The software appeared to be running normally. It was only when users tried to execute specific tasks like authorizing a fuel delivery or scheduling equipment maintenance that errors appeared. By 12:30 a.m., the decision was made to take the affected systems offline to prevent further data corruption. That decision was prudent from a security perspective. It also meant that for the next 90 minutes, American forces in Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, and the United Arab Emirates had no automated system for managing logistics operations. Everything had to be done manually using paper forms and radio communications. The operational impact was significant. Fuel deliveries that were scheduled for the early morning hours were delayed because authorization could not be processed through the normal system. Aircraft maintenance that required parts from supply depots could not be scheduled because the inventory tracking system was offline. Troop rotations that required transportation coordination were delayed because movement orders could not be generated. None of these delays created immediate safety risks. American forces were never in danger, but the delays created inefficiencies that cascaded through the following days as logistics personnel worked to clear backlogs and verify that manually processed transactions were recorded correctly once systems came back online. From a military operational perspective, 90 minutes of logistics disruption is manageable. From a strategic signaling perspective, it is profound. Iran demonstrated that it can reach into American military networks that are supposed to be secure and impose tangible costs without ever firing a shot. That demonstration changes the calculus of escalation because it shows Iran has tools for responding to American pressure that do not trigger the kind of automatic military retaliation that a physical attack would generate. Received. That is announcement number one. Announcement number two, the forensic investigation has revealed that Iranian operators deleted all logs of their access after executing the attack. This is standard practice in sophisticated cyber operations, but the thoroughness with which it was done in this case has impressed American investigators. According to U.S. Cyber Command officials speaking on Background to Defense One, the Iranian operators not only deleted logs from the systems they directly accessed, but also deleted backup logs stored on separate servers and corrupted the audit trail mechanisms that are supposed to provide redundancy. The result is that investigators do not have complete visibility into everything the Iranian operators did while they had access to the networks. They know that the operators executed a command that corrupted logistics databases. They do not know whether the operators also exfiltrated data, installed persistent backdoors for future access, or conducted reconnaissance on other systems. That uncertainty is creating significant concern within Pentagon cybersecurity leadership. The standard procedure after a cyber intrusion is to conduct a complete forensic analysis, determine exactly what the attacker accessed, remediate any damage, and implement controls to prevent recurrence. That procedure assumes investigators can reconstruct what happened by examining logs and system artifacts. When logs have been comprehensively deleted, reconstruction becomes much more difficult. The current assessment is that Iranian operators likely did not exfiltrate significant quantities of data because there is no evidence of large data transfers in network traffic logs. However, the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence when the attacker has demonstrated the capability to delete forensic artifacts. Stay with me because this is where the implications for American cyber defense posture become impossible to ignore. The Defense Department has spent billions of dollars over the past decade implementing security controls, intrusion detection systems, and incident response capabilities designed to prevent exactly this type of attack. Those investments are based on a threat model where adversaries are attempting to penetrate military networks from the outside using technical exploits. The Iranian operation succeeded by going around those defenses entirely. Instead of trying to hack through firewalls and intrusion detection systems, Iranian operators simply compromised a trusted insider with legitimate access. That approach is not new. It is called supply chain compromise, and cybersecurity experts have been warning about it for years. What is new is the execution at a level of sophistication that allowed the operation to succeed against one of the most heavily defended network environments in the world. The response from U.S. Cyber Command has been to order a comprehensive review of all third-party contractors with access to classified or sensitive military networks. That review is examining contractor security practices, employee vetting procedures, and the technical controls that govern contractor access. According to officials familiar with the review, preliminary findings have identified numerous instances where contractor security practices do not meet the standards that would be expected given the sensitivity of the systems they access. Those findings are prompting discussions about whether the military should reduce its reliance on contractors for network maintenance or implement more stringent oversight of contractor activities. Received. That is announcement number 2. Announcement number 3, and this one is receiving almost no public discussion. Iranian state media has not claimed responsibility for the attack. That silence is deliberate and significant. In previous Iranian cyber operations against American targets, including the 2012 attacks on American banks and the 2013 attacks on the Navy Marine Corps intranet, Iranian officials eventually acknowledged the operations either directly or through proxies. The absence of any public acknowledgement in this case suggests that Iran views this operation differently. It is not intended as a public demonstration of capability. It is intended as a private message to American decision makers. The message is straightforward. Iran can impose costs on American military operations in the region using tools that are deniable, difficult to defend against, and below the threshold that would justify a military response. That messaging strategy is sophisticated because it exploits a fundamental ambiguity in how the United States responds to cyber attacks. If Iran launches a missile at an American base, the response is clear. The United States will retaliate with military force. If Iran conducts a cyber operation that temporarily disrupts logistics software, the response is much less clear. Cyber operations exist in a gray zone where the appropriate response is contested even within the U.S. government. Some officials argue that significant cyber attacks should be treated as acts of war and should trigger military retaliation. Other officials argue that cyber attacks should be responded to with counter-cyber operations, sanctions, or diplomatic pressure, but not kinetic military force. That internal disagreement creates space for adversaries to conduct operations that impose real costs while remaining confident that the response will be limited. According to former National Security Agency official Jake Williams, speaking in an interview with Wired, the Iranian operation on May 20th was calibrated precisely to exploit that ambiguity. It caused enough disruption to demonstrate capability and impose cost. It did not cause enough damage to create casualties or destroy critical systems in ways that would generate political pressure for military retaliation. That calibration shows that Iranian cyber strategists understand American decision-making processes and are designing operations to achieve strategic effects while managing escalation risks. Here is why that matters. It means that Iran has developed a toolkit for strategic competition that does not depend on matching American military power directly. Iran cannot defeat the U.S. military in conventional conflict. Iran can impose cumulative costs through cyber operations, proxy forces, and asymmetric tactics that make American military presence in the region more expensive and more complicated, without ever triggering the kind of decisive American response that would eliminate Iranian capabilities. That strategy has been effective for Iran for years. The May 20th cyber operation demonstrates that the strategy is becoming more sophisticated and more difficult to counter. Received. That is announcement number 3. Now let's talk about what is really happening behind the headlines because there are two stories playing out simultaneously and only one is being reported. The public story is that this was a successful cyber attack that caused temporary disruption and is now being investigated. The private story, confirmed by multiple defense officials and cybersecurity experts, is that this attack has prompted a fundamental reassessment of how vulnerable American military networks actually are to state-sponsored cyber operations. The assumption within the Pentagon has been that closed network architectures provide robust protection against external threats. The May 20th attack demonstrates that assumption is false when adversaries are willing to invest the time and resources necessary to compromise trusted insiders. That realization is forcing uncomfortable questions about whether current network security models are adequate for an era where near-peer adversaries have sophisticated cyber capabilities. Think carefully about what this represents. The United States has overwhelming conventional military superiority in the Middle East. American air power, naval power, and ground forces are unmatched by any regional actor. But conventional superiority does not translate into immunity from asymmetric attacks in the cyber domain. Iran has invested heavily in developing cyber capabilities precisely because cyber operations offer a way to contest American power without requiring Iran to build aircraft carriers or stealth fighters. The return on investment has been substantial. For a fraction of the cost of a single American destroyer, Iran has built cyber units that can impose operational costs on the entire U.S. military presence in a region. American officials are not discussing this publicly, but the internal debates are intense. There is a recognition that the current approach to cyber defense, which emphasizes perimeter security and network isolation, is insufficient against adversaries who target the supply chain and trusted insiders. There is also a recognition that fundamentally changing that approach would require massive investments in new security architectures, more stringent contractor oversight, and potentially reducing reliance on third-party vendors. Those changes would be expensive and disruptive. They would also be necessary if the United States wants to avoid a future where routine cyber operations by adversaries create persistent low-level degradation of military readiness. If you are following cybersecurity issues in a military context, what happened on May 20th is not an isolated incident. It is part of a pattern where state-sponsored actors are demonstrating increasingly sophisticated capabilities to penetrate supposedly secure networks. Russia has done it. China has done it. North Korea has done it. Now Iran has done it. The pattern indicates that the gap between American cyber defenses and adversary offensive capabilities is narrowing faster than most public assessments acknowledge. This pattern has repeated throughout history, and every time it repeats, the outcome is the same. German U-boats in World War I. When the war began, British naval planners were confident that their surface fleet supremacy guaranteed control of the seas. They were correct that German surface ships could not challenge British battleships directly. What they did not anticipate was that German submarines could impose enormous costs on British shipping without ever engaging the British fleet in direct battle. U-boat operations sank millions of tons of Allied shipping and came close to starving Britain into surrender. The submarines were not a silver bullet that won the war for Germany. They were an asymmetric capability that imposed costs far exceeding their procurement price and that forced Britain to dedicate enormous resources to convoy protection and anti-submarine warfare. The parallel here is exact. Iranian cyber operations will not defeat the U.S. military. They will impose cumulative costs that make American military operations more expensive and more complicated, and that forced the United States to dedicate resources to cyber defense that would otherwise be available for other priorities. So where does this leave us? Let me give you three clear paths because there is no honest middle ground here. Path 1, the United States implements comprehensive reforms to contractor security practices, network access controls, and insider threat monitoring. This would require significant investment but would substantially reduce the risk of similar attacks succeeding in the future. The likelihood of this path is moderate. There is recognition within the Pentagon that reforms are necessary. The question is whether there is political will to fund those reforms and bureaucratic capacity to implement them effectively across an enormous and complex organization. Path 2, the United States responds to the May 20th attack with a counter-cyber operation against Iranian networks. This could include disrupting Iranian command and control systems, corrupting Iranian military databases, or exposing Iranian cyber operators to retaliation from other actors. The likelihood of this path is moderate to high. American cyber offensive capabilities are more sophisticated than Iranian capabilities, and the United States has demonstrated willingness to use those capabilities in response to attacks on American interests. The risk is that cyber retaliation could escalate into a broader cyber conflict where both sides are conducting ongoing operations against each other's infrastructure. Path 3, the situation continues with periodic Iranian cyber operations that impose manageable but persistent costs on American military activities in the region. Neither side escalates to kinetic conflict. Both sides understand that cyber operations below a certain threshold are acceptable tools of strategic competition. American cyber defenses improve incrementally but never eliminate vulnerabilities entirely. Iranian capabilities continue to advance through experience and investment. The likelihood of this path is high. It represents the most probable future based on current trajectories. It is also the least satisfying outcome from an American perspective because it means accepting that American networks will be persistently contested by adversaries with improving capabilities.